rain was coming down in sheets, each drop like a tiny hammer against the roof of my van. Midnight deliveries were the worst, especially out here where the street lights surrendered to the darkness miles ago. My GPS was glitching, the little blue dot spinning aimlessly. "You have arrived," a robotic voice chirped, but all I saw was a pair of rusted iron gates, twisted like skeletal fingers, barely visible through the thick, rolling fog. And beyond them, a silhouette, a house. No, a mansion, looming out of the gloom like a forgotten nightmare. Blackwood Manor, the address on the package. I grabbed the small, unusually heavy box from the passenger seat and my flashlight, stepping out into the cold, wet night. The gate creaked open with a groan that seemed to echo from the very stones of the house. The path was overgrown. Stone lions covered in moss stood guard, their faces frozen in silent snarls. The air was heavy, still, and smelled of damp earth and something else, something metallic like old blood. The front door was massive, a slab of dark, weathered oak with a heavy iron knocker, shaped like a raven. I hesitated, my breath catching in my throat. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to drop the package and run. But the job was the job. I raised my hand and let the knocker fall. The sound was swallowed by the house, leaving only the drumming of the rain. I waited. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time. Suddenly a light flickered on in an upstairs window. A pale, wavering glow. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a fresh wave of unease. The light moved, drifting from one window to the next, as if someone was carrying a single candle through the cavernous rooms. It descended, getting closer to the ground floor. I braced myself, expecting the door to swing open. Instead, the light appeared directly behind the small, leaded glass window set into the door itself. But there was no face, no silhouette, just a dancing flame. Then a whisper. So faint, I thought it was the wind. It slithered through the keyhole, a dry, rasping sound. "Leave it." My heart hammered against my ribs. Hello? "I have a delivery for Blackwood Manor," I called out, my voice trembling slightly. "We know what you have," the voice hissed back, closer now as if pressed against the other side of the door. "It's not for us, it's for the house." What did that even mean? I took a step back, my flashlight beam dancing nervously across the porch. That's when I noticed it. The package in my hand was vibrating. A low, deep hum resonated through the cardboard, a feeling that traveled up my arm and settled in my chest like a cold stone. I looked down at the plain brown box. There was no sender's address, just a destination, Blackwood Manor. "Just sign for it and I'll be on my way," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. A low chuckle echoed from inside, a sound that wasn't human. It was dry and brittle, like leaves skittering across pavement. "The house has already signed." My eyes darted to the delivery scanner clipped to my belt. The screen was glowing. On the signature line, where a name should be, a single, spidery symbol was slowly drawing itself in jagged black ink. It looked like a claw, or maybe a twisted tree branch. I hadn't even taken the scanner off my belt. Panic seized me. I dropped the package. It hit the stone steps with a dull, heavy thud. But it didn't sound like cardboard hitting stone. It sounded wet. A dark stain began to spread from the bottom of the box, seeping into the rain-soaked wood. It wasn't ink. It was thick, dark, and red. The light in the window vanished. The house was plunged back into complete darkness. But I could feel it now. Eyes, dozens of them, watching from every black window pane. The feeling of being observed was so intense, it was a physical pressure. The fog swirled, and for a second I thought I saw faces in it, pale, gaunt faces with hollow eyes and gaping mouths, twisting and dissolving in the mist. "It belongs to the collector," the whisper came again, not from the door this time, but from all around me, from the trees, the ground, the very air. "And the collector is always hungry." The front door began to creak open, not with the sound of old hinges, but with the sickening crack of splitting wood, as if it was being forced from its frame by an immense pressure from within. A sliver of absolute blackness appeared in the gap, a void so deep it seemed to swallow the light from my flashlight. From that darkness a low growl rumbled, a sound that vibrated in my bones. I didn't wait to see what the collector looked like. I scrambled backward, tripping over a loose stone and falling hard. My flashlight flew from my hand, rolling across the path before its light was extinguished with a faint pop. I was in total darkness, save for the faint, ghostly glow of the fog. The growl grew louder, closer. The sound of something heavy dragging itself across the stone porch echoed in the night. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the searing pain in my knee, and ran. I didn't look back. I sprinted down the overgrown path, the twisted gates a beacon in the gloom. The air grew colder, and the whispers followed me, weaving through the trees, calling my name in a dozen different spectral voices. The main gate slammed shut just as I reached it, the sound of metal on metal ringing out like a death knell. I didn't stop. I threw myself at the bars, squeezing through a gap where the rusted iron had bent outward. I fumbled for my van keys, my hands shaking so violently I could barely fit the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life on the first try, a miracle. I slammed the van into reverse, tires spinning on the wet gravel, and peeled away from that cursed place. In my rear-view mirror, the mansion was just a black shape against a gray sky. But for a fleeting moment, as the van skidded onto the main road, I saw it. A light flickered back on in the highest window of the tallest spire, and in that window a tall, slender silhouette stood, perfectly still, watching me go. I drove until the sun came up, never once looking back. I quit my job that morning. I never told anyone the full story. Who would believe me? But sometimes, late at night, when the rain is falling and the fog is thick, I can still hear that whisper. The collector is always hungry, and I check the locks on my doors, wondering what was really in that box and what happens when the house gets hungry again. The rain has always been a comfort to me, a soft gray blanket over the world, muffling the sharp edges of reality. That Tuesday afternoon was no different. Mom and Dad were out of town, a rare business trip that left me the undisputed king of the castle for a whole week. I was sprawled on the living room couch, controller in hand, lost in a digital world while the real one outside was a gentle patter against the windows. The house was mine, a familiar and safe space. The rhythmic drumming of the rain was my only companion, a steady, soothing beat. Then a new sound cut through the gentle rhythm, a faint creak from upstairs. I paused my game, listening. It was probably just the old house settling, I told myself. It was built in the 50s. It had more aches and pains than my grandpa. I unpaused and went back to my game, but the seed of unease had been planted. The silence between the raindrops suddenly felt heavier, more deliberate. A few minutes later, another sound. A soft thud, this time from the direction of the kitchen, like a cupboard door swinging shut on its own. I muted the TV. The only sound now was the rain and my own breathing, which had somehow picked up its pace. I tried to rationalize it. The wind. A draft, but the sounds felt too specific, too placed. I got up and walked to the kitchen. Everything was in its place. All the cupboard doors were closed. The back door was locked. I stood there for a long moment, feeling a bit foolish. I was letting the solitude get to me, turning me into one of those jumpy characters in a horror movie. Shaking my head, I turned to go back to the living room. That's when the doorbell rang. It wasn't a gentle chime. It was a sharp, insistent press held for a few seconds too long. It jolted me, making my heart hammer against my ribs. Who would be out in this downpour? No one was expecting me. My friends knew I was planning a solo gaming marathon. I walked to the front door, my footsteps hesitant. The rain was coming down harder now, blurring the small pane of glass at the top of the door. I peered through the peephole. Nothing, just the empty, glistening porch and the deluge beyond. It must have been a prank, annoying but harmless. I was about to turn away when the doorbell rang again, another long, demanding buzz that vibrated through the wood. This time I whipped the door open, ready to give some neighborhood kid a piece of my mind. The porch was empty. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I stepped out onto the porch, looking left and right. The street was deserted, just rain, wind, and the swaying trees. I quickly stepped back inside, locking the deadbolt with a decisive click. My heart was thumping a frantic rhythm. This wasn't a prank. This was something else. I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath, when a flicker of movement caught my eye through the sidelight window. I froze. Standing on the lawn just beyond the edge of the porch was a man. He was tall and unnervingly gaunt, his cheap suit soaked through and clinging to his skeletal frame. His hair was plastered to his scalp, and rainwater streamed down his pale face. But it was his eyes that held me captive. They were dark, sunken pits, devoid of any light or emotion, and they were fixed directly on me. He wasn't moving. He wasn't trying to get my attention. He was just watching. The intensity of his stare was a physical force, pinning me in place. Time seemed to warp, stretching and thinning. We stood there, separated by a few feet of glass and wood, locked in this silent, terrifying standoff. The world outside the window seemed to fade, the rain and wind becoming a distant hum. All that existed was his hollow gaze, a deep, primal fear, the kind you read about but never truly understand, began to crawl up my spine. This wasn't a man who had lost his way. This was a predator, and I was his prey. My legs finally broke their paralysis. I stumbled backward, away from the window, my eyes never leaving his. He didn't react. He just continued to stare, his expression unchanging. I needed to call the police. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers slick with sweat. I backed into the living room, keeping the doorway in my line of sight. I never should have looked away. When I glanced back at the window, he was gone. A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost made my knees buckle. He was gone. It was over. But the relief was short-lived, replaced by a new, more horrifying sound. A metallic scratching. From the front door. Click, scrape, jiggle. He was picking the lock. Panic, cold, and absolute seized me. My breath hitched in my throat. I couldn't scream. My legs felt like lead, but I forced them to move. I didn't think I just ran up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. The scratching sound seemed to follow me, growing louder, more frantic. I slammed my bedroom door shut and fumbled with the lock, my trembling hands making it almost impossible. The lock clicked into place. It felt flimsy, pathetic. I shoved my heavy dresser against the door, the wood groaning in protest. It wasn't enough. It wouldn't be enough. I scrambled across the room and wrenched open my closet door, diving into the darkness within. I pulled the door shut, leaving just a sliver of a crack to see through. I crouched among my old shoes and dusty clothes, trying to silence my ragged breathing. My entire world had shrunk to this cramped, dark space. Then I heard it, a loud click from downstairs, the unmistakable sound of the front door swinging open. My blood ran cold. He was inside, silence, a long, drawn-out silence that was more terrifying than any noise. I strained my ears, every nerve screaming. And then a new sound began. Footsteps, heavy, wet, methodical. They moved through the downstairs living room. A pause. Then they moved into the kitchen. Each step was deliberate, unhurried. He was exploring. He was taking his time. He knew I was here. He knew I was trapped. The footsteps started moving again, this time towards the base of the stairs. Thump, thump, thump. Slow, steady, and coming closer. They were ascending. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying this was a nightmare. Thump, thump. He was on the landing now. He was on my floor. I held my breath, listening. The footsteps didn't come towards my room. They went the other way, towards my parents' bedroom. I heard the door creak open. A few moments of silence, then the sound of drawers being opened and closed. Then he moved to the guest room. Same thing. A methodical, unhurried search. He was toying with me. He was drawing out the terror, letting it build, letting it consume me. He was saving my room for last. I was huddled in the closet, a caged animal, waiting for the inevitable. The footsteps finally left the guest room and came to a stop directly outside my bedroom door. Silence. The world stopped. My own heartbeat was a deafening drum in my ears. I watched through the crack in the closet, my eyes fixed on the sliver of my bedroom door I could see. Slowly, agonizingly, the doorknob began to turn. It turned with a smooth, silent precision that defied the frantic scratching I'd heard earlier. It turned until it could go no further. Then a gentle push against the door. It didn't budge. He pushed again, harder this time. The dresser I'd barricaded it with scraped against the floor but held firm. He stopped. I waited for the sound of him breaking the door down, for the splintering of wood. But there was nothing, only silence. My mind raced. Was he giving up? Was he leaving? And then I heard a sound that shattered my reality. A soft chuckle. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from inside my room. My head snapped towards the corner of my bedroom, to the dark space beside my bookshelf, and that's when I saw him. He was already there. He had been there the whole time. The gaunt man was unfolding himself from the shadows, his sunken eyes glinting in the dim light filtering through the window.